All right, welcome back to the Better Realtor Podcast. My name is Preston Earnest.
And I'm Scott Moeller.
Hey, and I'm Nadia Earnest.
And together we make up the Better Realtor Podcast. You join us every week as we dive into all the cool, exciting things in our business. And today we're talking about one of our favorite things, negotiation of commissions. Am I right?
That's right, baby.
Yeah, so Scott, what do let's dive right in, man. Like, this is one of the most talked about things in our field, I would imagine. What do you think?
Well, it's a hot topic right now because there's a lot of major lawsuits happening with buyers' commissions and who's going to pay, if the seller's going to pay or buyers are going to pay buyers' agents. So super hot topic at the moment. Also, it's a complicated topic for real estate agents and sellers to discuss. Right. And I feel like a lot of agents lack negotiation skills. I feel like sellers don't want to negotiate. So we're going to talk about best practices and kind of just be clear about commissions and give sellers some tools and real estate agents some tools when going into negotiations for commissions.
I love it. So this is the perfect episode for if you're a client or if you are a realtor yourself. Let's dive right in. First off, commission rates are always subject to negotiation, always.
Yeah, and in most listing agreements, it will state that. So prepare to negotiate. I have found that most sellers don't want to negotiate.
Right,
because they're like teachers. They're regular people. They're not necessarily salespeople, or it's uncomfortable to negotiate. Also, and
they're like, how do I do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Or they're just like,
even the act of it itself puts people in an uncomfortable position. Yeah, where maybe they feel like bad for wanting to pay less, or the reverse of you're not taking my money. Like it's a lot of that.
Yeah, and it is a financial conversation. So it's like you're asking someone to cut their costs, and that's awkward. Right. And so they kind of just want you to tell them what you charge. Yeah. And then they'll ask maybe 3 to 4 other agents, and then they'll just choose the cheapest one, which is the worst thing to do in any situation.
I was just going to say, it's like you kind of get what you pay for. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
For the most part.
Not always, but.
Except like during, the crazy real estate market, 2020, 2021, where you could arguably just put a sign in the yard and your house would sell.
Right. Yeah, totally.
But there were still tactics and things that you needed to do to prep the home and negotiate other terms of the contract. And, even things were going 100, 200K over asking. It's like, maybe you could have got another 50K or 25K or, know, so.
And hopefully at the end of this podcast, we'll be able to detail the reasoning behind some of those commission points and stuff.
Yeah.
So hopefully you'll leave going, oh, actually, it's worth the investment. The standard commission, we have a couple of notes I'm going to read so I don't get it wrong. The standard commission nationwide typically ranges at about 6%, with 3% allocated to each side. In some markets, this may vary. I mean, we're talking about 2.5 sometimes allocated to the buyer side with the 3.5 to the seller or the listing side. This is still negotiable.
Yeah, and it's market dependent. So just whatever market you're in, the goal is to build so much value in what you do and what you offer that commission almost is forgotten about, right? You want to, as an agent, walk into a listing presentation or the listing table and wow your seller or your potential client.
So that's part of we were talking in the last episode about really creating an experience and creating, the value for your client to go, okay, I don't even know what it is because it doesn't even matter because they're doing so much.
Yeah.
Killing it.
We spent an hour talking about our pre-market strategy in our last episode. Yeah. Right. And there's a lot that goes into that. And we could have probably spoke another hour on it in great detail. So, if you're discussing the value that you bring, then commission will be forgotten about. It's really like, I want that.
Right.
And that's what it costs. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's the goal. I mean, a real estate professional out there, that our goal is to bring such a benefit to our buyers and sellers that they will experience the highest net return for, if they're selling their property, or if they, are looking to buy, we're going to get them the best terms. That is the point with going with a real estate professional, is that you're going to bring something to the table that they can't on their own.
Exactly. And if they're uncomfortable or not the best at negotiating with a realtor one-on-one in their home, then, would they feel comfortable negotiating contracts and showing their house on their own and taking photos, dealing with vendors and inspectors? And, there's a whole process when you get a listing, right? The pre-marketing, the marketing, the escrow, and then closing on the property, and the post-close process. So there's a lot that you
Goes
take
into
over.
place.
Yeah.
And it directly affects your pocketbook. I remember, so I'm the newest realtor out of all of our group, and I will never forget going through all of the study of getting my license. I was shocked at how much I felt like I was becoming a lawyer. Yeah. Because there's a lot that goes into it that if you're just a buyer or a seller, you may not even realize some of the contingencies that can come out of just having no knowledge. Some really, difficult contract points can come up and you're like, I would have never guessed that. Or you can lose a deal because of something you were just unaware of. Having someone who knows how to take you through that is really important, I think.
Yeah. So you're paying for representation. You're
Right.
paying for representation. You're paying for legal mitigation, right? You want to mitigate. You can't eliminate risk, but you can mitigate risk. And a true professional will do that. And they'll provide options for listing your home. They'll provide options for marketing your home, for bringing buyers, what their vetting process looks like.
Right.
And so these are all things that build your value as a real estate agent. And then you're able to have an easy conversation when negotiating commission. So if sellers talk about commission up front, they're like, I'm selling my house. What do you charge? It's like, well, it depends. I have options for you,
Right.
And I can charge 4% if you want. And we can give 2% to the buyer side and 2% to me, but this is what that looks like.
Right.
And anybody that provides 4.5%, they're, it's going to look very similar or worse,
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
We can put a sign in the yard and we can talk once a month if you want, or we can focus on what you really want, which is, X, Y, and Z. It's really typically money. Usually it's time, it's convenience, it's ease of the real estate process and transaction. Right. So we have tools to make it easy for you, make it fun.
Less stressful, something that's already very stressful.
Yes.
Really, you want somebody to hold your hand through that. And I mean, even you think about people that are even busy, like they're busy, right? You're dealing with people with homes that are worth $2.5 million and probably, but it's like, do you have the time? Right. Like, do you have the time? Do you have the extra however many hours of the day or in the week to go through this process from beginning to end?
Right.
And think about every detail.
That's an important point.
Yeah. And usually people in that price range, they understand the value of a professional. Yeah. And so the more professional you are and the more you're able to present your value, right? Because what's that saying? Your plan is only as good as you're able to communicate it. Right. Correct. So that's essentially what you're doing. You're communicating your value. So if you can learn how to present your value, that's negotiating commissions. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's huge. Right. And what we do, we spend a lot of time prepping and putting together our presentations, and they're tailored and specific to everyone's property and their specific situation. And so that's where the negotiation starts with commissions.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful place to start, and not all real estate professionals will. It's important to know that.
Well, I don't think they know. Even the way you dress, right? Yeah. You're negotiating your commission. You show up on time, that's negotiating your commission. You show up with proper documentation and comps, and you have a beautiful listing prezo, that's negotiating your commission.
Right.
Or the way you communicate, that's negotiating your commission. The way you respond to them, the problems that you're solving, right?
Right.
The answers that you provide for them, that's negotiating your commission.
Right.
And so you want to do all that first.
Yes.
And then I've had so many listing presentations and they're like, wait, we didn't talk about the price of the house or your commission. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, yeah, we'll figure it out. And they're like, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's not how it always goes, but because they want to work with us so much,
right.
they don't really
They're
care.
willing. They're willing to just go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the potential upside is greater. You know, the potential, what we're going to be doing for them is seeking the biggest net return for a seller. And that includes with the commission that they would be paying.
Yeah. So a real big tip is a lot of agents, they'll go in and they use the word no a lot, you know,
Yeah.
and they'll start high, 6%. That's what we charge. And they'll just come right out of the gate. They practice that 6%. They're in the mirror at home before the 6%, 6%, you know, and then if the seller asks, well, can you do 5 or 4.5? No.
Right.
Okay. Well, our philosophy is to be flexible, right? It's not only be flexible on your commission, but be flexible on your communication and your, how you're going to carry out the transaction, because you're working with families. It's one of the most stressful, like you said, events in somebody's life. Usually they're moving or changing jobs or getting married or divorced, like we discussed. So be flexible.
Right.
And don't just come in and say 6% no.
Talking about being flexible, we had to pause. We ran out of space on Nadia's phone. So we're back. We had just gotten done talking about being flexible, how if we're able to accurately describe and be understood to the value of what we're doing, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. So basically by being flexible, you're learning how to have a conversation on commissions and what somebody is going to pay you, because it just doesn't feel good to a seller, that you're going to charge them the max amount and there's no wiggle room. There's no negotiating and there's really no explaining what you're going to do besides your weak listing presentation, that you got from the internet and, and you saying that you have a marketing plan, know, right?
So, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that you should definitely interview a few agents, and, you think you got agents that are going to work at different commissions. How would somebody that's making that decision to hire an agent, like what should they be looking for if somebody's going 6%? No, I'll do it for 4.5%. Like,
I think that's a really good question. And I think if you're out there and you're an agent who's been in the game a long time, practice a technique of trying to put yourself back into the position of not knowing anything about real estate. Why would you go from 6% to 4%? Why not go 4%? Out of the eyes of a client that we're hoping to help, outside of any additional knowledge of the real estate industry, it does sound like a math problem. You know what I mean? Like when you're looking to sell your house, you're like, well, I want to save money. Because it's all about money. It's all about selling to get money, right? So from the eyes of someone who doesn't have context, so I think for me, the most important thing to learn and to show my clients, and this is something that we focus on here, is being able to communicate the context. Would you agree?
Yeah, from a seller standpoint, you're not saving money by discounting services. So you're not saving money when you go purchase, you see an ad and you're like, oh, Nike shoes are $25 off. if you go and purchase those shoes for that sale, you're not saving money. You just spent, money. You just spent.
You still spent money.
You still spent money. You spent $140 on shoes, and usually they're $160. You spend $140. Right. So I think from a seller standpoint, you have to change your perspective, right? You want to hire the best, so you have to interview real estate agents, and then when you interview, you have to be intentional, because most agents are going to say the same thing in a listing presentation. So pay attention to how they communicate prior to the appointment. Are they sending you a calendar invitation? Because we do, right? And then make sure that they send you communication on what you're going to be discussing, because that's what we do. Right. And then we also send, what do we send? Our forms out.
In what context?
Prior to listing appointments.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if your potential client will send a form to you that is tell us information about your property that would be pertinent to know, so that we can package it together. As we're prepping to meet you, we want to know what matters to you the most.
Yeah, they're called seller intake forms.
Yeah.
That we send out. And then property information forms, 2 different forms. So we know everything about your property. We know what utility companies that you have, what schools that you go to, what's most important to you, time, money, where you're going, right? We want your birthday, because we're going to send you a birthday gift after we close on the transaction. So that's just before we even meet. Right. And these are easy forms and
they're quick, but easy to answer.
One of the things that I noticed with the listing client that you're working on right now is you're looking at the information, you're looking at the data, you're using that as a metric to go, okay, what do we need to focus on? So when you're showing up, which, I've heard of friends who have listed their homes, and it's like the agent just shows up to be like, hey, so when do you want to sell your house?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you have all this information that you're, like you said, creating this presentation that goes above and beyond, and you're doing your due diligence. That I would imagine is you've done already work before you even earned any money or any commissions.
Right. Yeah. Our sellers love these forms, and they love receiving a calendar invitation and the confirmation emails. It's just showing how the rest of the transaction's going to carry out.
Right. And an email recap after the meeting. Here's what we discussed. Here's the timelines we talked about.
Yeah.
And being flexible. If that has to change because X, Y, Z, great. Now we're going to revisit. Our timeline was this. Now it's this.
Yes.
Exactly.
So interview several agents and notice these things. If you're not getting the calendar invites and the seller intake forms and the email follow-ups and the communication prior to the listing appointment, make a note of that. Right. And find an agent. If you interview 3 of them and none of them do it, keep interviewing. Find some good agents out there.
Yeah.
And then specifically ask them what their pre-marketing strategy is, right? Ask them how they're going to market the house, how they're going to prep the house, what insight they can give that's going to bring the most value to the sale of your property. Ask them these questions and get specific about it, and be like, okay, well, what websites are these going on? What kind of ads are you running? Who's your photographer? So we also bring our stagers. We bring contractors and handymen to our listing appointments, just depending on the information that we get back or we already know about the property.
Yeah.
Right. And through the seller intake forms and the conversations that we have. So if we show up and we have our contractors walking around getting bids while we're presenting, and our stagers walking around providing bids and then putting together on their iPads kind of, what they would do, a mock-up of how they would stage the property. And then we add that into the presentation.
That's awesome.
That's negotiating commission.
Right.
I'm negotiating my commission with you, and you're not even knowing it. I'm doing it by providing all the tools and necessary things that we know that will sell your house for top dollar.
Right.
So for agents out there that are listening, how would you counsel or advise an agent and how to navigate commission disputes or disagreements with clients?
Well, then it's a value add. They didn't present well enough.
Right.
So we would have to, I highly recommend taking a communications class. Like, go to your community college. I'm dead serious. I did this, and I had the best. My teacher was awesome, and I think I got like an A- in the class or something. I loved it. And I was
awesome.
older and I was in the class
Yeah.
and we presented all the time and it was scary at first, but I learned so much. So my point is take a communications class at your junior college, take one online. There's, gurus on Instagram that you could hire, learn how to communicate, learn how to present, right?
Would you ever not do or take on a client that, I don't know, lowballed the commission? Like, would you ever go, because is there a fine line between being flexible and going, no, I'm not going to do it for that?
Sometimes it just depends.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I just wanted to add something to your previous question. Definitely build your skills. Like what Scott was saying, take a class, take a course, invest in yourself, but also like confidence can't really be faked in this world. Like confidence comes from doing the work. So take the time to prepare for your listing presentation. If you do need to, if you're married, grab your spouse and be like, hey, can I present this to you? As if you're this potential client. Take the time to actually practice it out loud, outside of your head. Because, if you are taking a course or learning under the tutelage of somebody, you're going to realize very quickly that sometimes what's happening in your head and how you communicate it are vastly different. You might think, oh, I know what I'm going to say. And then you get there and you just get stumped. You can get past that if you're well equipped. So take the time, really study, really put it together, and then practice delivering it. If you're a part of a team, call another agent, and be like, hey, can we get together for coffee? And I just pitched this to you and you give me notes. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there before you're actually putting yourself out there, because reps are going to equal you being better prepared. You being better prepared is going to equal you being more confident. And there's really no getting around that step.
Right. So we can guarantee the highest price point for your house because this is how we operate.
Yeah.
Right. This is how we show up to our listing appointments, and this is how we communicate. This is how we negotiate and present the problems that we solve, our strategies, and we're checking all the boxes.
Right.
Right. Everything that needs to happen, that's able to happen, we do or suggest, and that's going to yield what your house sells for.
Absolutely. And there's a list that we wrote down. It probably is not even comprehensive, but it's a really good start on how to adequately articulate your value as an agent. And for those listening who are interested in buying and selling, look for these qualities, such as, are you presented with a list of options like we talked about before? Hey, we're flexible. We got options for you. Were you given options? Are you giving options? Are you giving services provided? Value add. Offerings, strategic approach. Is there strategy? Is there thought behind your agent presenting to you? There's a whole litany of options like buyer acquisition. Do they have the ability to bring in a buyer? Does it seem like they're giving you assistance with your preparation? All of this is a huge value add if you're able to take what you're doing and communicate, hey, by the way, this is all of the things that you're getting with our services. Don't miss that point. If you're a realtor out there doing these things and not communicate them, you got to communicate so people can understand your value.
Absolutely.
Set yourself apart.
Set yourself apart. Be better.
Do better.
Do better.
And that's what we're committed to here. So if you're listening and this helped you, do us a favor, subscribe to our podcast channel. You can find us everywhere. We're going to be on YouTube. We're on Instagram. Come check us out. We got a really special announcement that we're going to be dropping in the next couple of weeks. I want you to stay tuned. You do not want to miss it. Whether you are a buyer, seller, or another agent, you want to know what's going on. So do us a favor. Like all of our profiles. Hop into this train that we've started, and we look forward to hearing more from your stories about how you guys have gotten better, hopefully through our stories. Thanks so much. See you next week.